All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to this limited series podcast, Queer AuDHD BIPOC. I am TQ, a queer trans disabled Chinese Singaporean AuDHDer and a student of this community. This podcast and our upcoming book is to help other queer, Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, South Asian, Middle Eastern, and people of color who are both autistic and ADHD because we exist. And we want to help you feel seen, less alone, and supported while living in multiple margins. Today, I'm joined by my friend Kristen Jeffers, who goes by Chris Pattern, I think almost everywhere, right?
Chris Pattern and at Black Urbanist. Yes, the autistic moment of having two distinct special interests and two distinct identities on the internet, and then realizing you're overwhelmed. The ADHD kicks in, you're overwhelmed. You're burned out.
But as our audience will find out, you found an incredible way to weave those two special interests together, and you have a special project coming up that I'm sure you're excited to share with the audience. But before we get to all of that, could you please introduce yourself and your identities?
So I am Kristen Jeffers. I am possibly by the time this hits the airwaves, I will have turned 40, but I'm 39. So yes, that squarely puts me in millennial territory if you're using those categorizations that are there. I am officially autistic. I've been denied my ADHD designation, but it's there. It's there. And that's something that dealing with being Black, being in the States, specifically, I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, but I'm from North Carolina. Most of my family back many, many generations to what I say, the boat, meaning, enslavement, has been in North Carolina. And yes, that is part of my legacy, being the descendant of the enslaved and, of course, the descendant of the enslaver. Yeah. And also just various family history, like various members of our family, cousins were married each other, and so there is a measure of shame that has been presented in those cases. But we're also, many of us are reclaiming. Many people in my family also work with students with disabilities, and that's just, they love it and they get a lot out of it. Also very important, I am a non-binary pansexual person. I do present feminine, and of course, image-wise today, I'm wearing my purple glasses, like my burgundy lipstick. I'm wearing a navy tank top. I have purple streaks in my kinky curly hair. I don't do hair typing, but pretty much any natural Black woman you've seen or natural feminine person you've seen with the bob shape, that's what's going on with me. I live with my wife, my masculine center Black wife. Both of us are suspected ADHD. She has an official ADHD diagnosis. I have the official autism diagnosis. And, we're like many traditional sapphic lesbian couples. We're inseparable. I'm putting my hands in my little grabby motion here. We're pretty tight. And both of us have also dealt with reproductive region issues that are typically seen in those who are treated feminine at the doctor. I'm going to use that terminology, those treated feminine at the doctor. Fibroids, endometriosis. We've had those conversations when we go into doctor's offices. We've had doctors that have been like, well, if you're having lesbian sex, why are you still here? You don't use your parts, but your parts can still cause trouble. And that's where I in this moment right now, as a Black, and specifically as someone who's been on the so-called United States, Turtle Island for generations, who's been navigating the Great Migration and has been navigating various civil rights victories. And then we're in a civil rights pullback right now. Yeah. And then so much of that civil rights pullback is also rooted in my disabled identity, specifically the types of disabilities I have, the types of healthcare that I need, the things that are going on with me that I need help at the doctor. People don't want to pay for it. And sometimes they want to punish me for it. They want to punish me for having a uterus. They want to punish me for having autism. They want to punish me for having attention issues, or not even evaluate me properly. They don't even, in the case of, as of this taping, I'm going to have to go independent or go to a different provider, because the provider I'm with, they do so much other wraparound care. They made sure I knew I had my fibroids and they got them out of my body. They've diagnosed me in perimenopause, and they've given me that. To me, that's a gift, because so many, especially Black women and Black folks that are socialized as women, we don't get those tools, especially for Black bodies and Black bodies that are fat and that tend to present as feminine or just traditionally feminine characteristics. That's why there's so many Black women that identify strictly as Black women, not in a transphobic way, but in a, hey, I get the right to be gendered. Because the other side of this has been, and I think this is touched on in Killing the Black Body, Sabrina Strings' book, about how specifically Black bodies aren't gendered in the same way. And that's also influenced how we've gendered ourselves and how we've queered our genders, how our queerness shows up. And it doesn't erase that there are other Black non-binary folks. I love making gender an option. I think for Black folks that are making these declarations, we're making those declarations in the spirit of Audre Lorde, defining yourself for yourself, making it clear, making it plain. And yes, I try to come into the world in a Black Black feminist place. And yes, Black feminists, if you spell them all out, and this will probably be the end of my intro, I'm a Black, queer, disabled, feminist, urbanist from North Carolina, living in DC, and I guess married. That's an identity too. So all of this is together. And I tend to work writing, communication, media. I podcasted off and on. I'm releasing a book called the Defying Gentrification Playbook that touches on a lot of these things. It's my first full-length workbook that's going to get major release. I have a Substack, Defying Gentrification, Crafting Liberation. And yeah, I've been reclaiming a lot of my ancestral crafts. North Carolina is known for its textile factories, furniture factories. Like, unfortunately, we weren't able to have autonomy in some of those spaces, not just from the plantation, but just a lot of sharecropping, a lot of factory towns, company towns. So being able to make my own clothes, sewing, crocheting, knitting a little bit, and all the other various fiber crafts, and even preparing yarn, noodling with wood, that's a deep hobby. That's kind of a newer of the special interest, but definitely crochet, definitely sewing, definitely media and marketing. And I've also been very concerned about how land is spaced. I grew up in rural environments, but I was always fascinated with city environments. Sesame Street was very much a thing. And here in the States, when I was coming up, it was the children's show. And it showed me, I'm like, well, hey, that's the kind of world I want to live in. Why can't I live in that kind of world? And so that's where the inquisitiveness really showed up. So yeah, I think that's a good sense of who I am. Yes, we are.
I'm here for it. I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast. A lot of us with multiple marginalized identities often feel like we're too much, but we're exactly all of these things, and it's okay to talk about it and let people know.
Yes.
You are all these things. And thank you for being here, Kristen. Would you like to share your AuDHD journey? We got kind of a sense of it, that big hiccup with the ADHD evaluation. What led you to seek out your autism diagnosis, and what's that journey been like accessing healthcare?
So I want to kind of give credit to my friend Lacey, who's a white feminine person from Baltimore. And we met through friends in the urban planning and architecture spaces. At one point, they worked as an architectural designer, interior designer. Mm-hmm. So basically, they were running into a lot of issues with being able to sit for the exams, being able to stay at work. And we were running into how ableist our community was, our professional community was. Then fast forward about maybe a couple years, my wife, who's a transportation advocate, briefly went into working with an urban planner as a transportation advocate, basically working with communities to help them connect to public transit. In the States, we have what's called paratransit, which is basically we have separate vehicles if you're a wheelchair user that are state mandated, and they're supposed to be provided to you free of cost or low cost. In the United States, in a lot of regions, that service is not free. Much like a lot of other healthcare services are not free. Yeah. And our jobs are tied to our healthcare. And that's what's been the big issue, is that now under the current regime administration of this so-called country, rather than just go ahead and assess everybody equally and make sure everybody has equal access to what they need, healthcare things are demonized. And so many of us who are autistic or who have ADHD, there's a moralization that's happened with us. Much like all over the world, those socialized as women, the diagnostic criteria wasn't there. I actually had an ex-boyfriend who was diagnosed as a child who was I believe they were about mid-support needs. I didn't look like that. Whatever was going on with me didn't look like that. But I knew that at work, even before I met my friend Lacey, who was dealing with these challenges in the architecture field, and then down the line gets EDS diagnosis and then gets the AUHD diagnosis. And then my wife, who's gone in these workspaces and then gets the ADHD diagnosis after her psychiatrist evaluated her. I'm still like, all of y'all got this going on, but what do you call what I have? Because once again, I'm very empathetic, hyperverbal. Sometimes I don't like that, the architecture and planning world tends to be special interests. And I don't like it in the sense that it's demonized as a special interest for people. It's something that's needed. We need people to help people get around. We need people to put buildings together. Hyper focus and hyper empathy, these are values. These are things that work. When you live in a fascist society, when you live in a society that's high control, or even a faith group, several of us have been involved in some high control faith groups that I know. All of us have these moments of not feeling like you have autonomy. And in the faith tradition, in the version of Christianity I was in, even though yes, I grew up adjacent to the Black church tradition that tends to be more expressive, the hymns are very expressive. There's the soul, the R&B, there's the preachers that are very hyperverbal and expressive in a lot of ways. So, and I grew up in the US South, and a lot of our pace is slower, our diction is slower anyway. A lot of people may be having these symptom profiles and nobody catches it, or they only catch the most extreme of it. And I was just telling another friend before we got on the recording today that I did not catch probably that I was having trouble until I went to an office. I did great in school. I did have some social awkwardness, and sometimes I would go to school and I would feel like prickly sometimes, and like smells and textures, and I have safe foods, and I try to have like a uniform of what I like to wear, but I was just like, well, don't everybody have that? Like I have an inner monologue. I'm like, but doesn't everybody have that? It's in the movies, so I'm sure everybody has an inner monologue. It wouldn't be in the movies if that wasn't the case. And yeah, as anybody who's watching the video can see, my expressiveness, using my hands to kind of punctuate myself. A lot of Southerners of a certain generation do that. That is a thing that happens culturally. And so generally when folks from the US South get diagnosed as autistic, it's because they can't catch a lot of our idioms, our turns of speech, our like phrases and sayings. That's missing for folks. And so I've had various different insurances. I've been on Medicaid, which is the public insurance here stateside. I've been on private insurance, different private insurers. And you could be at the same insurer, and depending on what private entity, or if you're like with a government entity and they pay into the system at a different rate, you have different versions of the plan. And so that affects things. That really comes into play for me. Like if it's time for me to get glasses, sometimes I get glasses for free. Sometimes I don't get glasses at all because it's not enough in the budget. And that's also some health providers. The one that I'm in, I don't want to mention it by name because different people have different experiences with it depending on the region. But just know, I've already told you I live in DC. It's the one that kind of has the center. You go to the one building and there's a bunch of doctors inside of the building. Your health chart is shared across all the doctors in the buildings. One of the things that's kind of universal throughout this chain is that they only test children for autism and ADHD. What happened, and that's another reason I want to be a little clandestine about who my insurer is, because I don't want my doctor to get in trouble. Basically, my doctor and I discussed the possibility of autism. And we agreed that there's a possibility of autism and that there's a possibility of ADHD. And so unfortunately, my official diagnosis is generalized anxiety, major depression, possibility of autism spectrum disorder, possibility of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And then but my chart does have parabenopause. My chart does have the formal way of saying that you've had fibroids. I think it's like glioma of the uterus. Like there's other things that are clear. There are other things that are in my charts as we discuss the possibility of. And then I have an outright denial of testing. Now they do an executive function clinic, but there were some numbers on it, and they claimed that those numbers weren't high enough for me to meet the threshold for ADHD. Oh, I can't even though they have a group therapy session for it, I can't go to it. But I am able to see a talk therapist. I am able to see a psychiatrist. I am able to try medications. They would prescribe me certain medications that I can test to see with my brain chemistry if those things would help me do better. But for me, being able to have the conversation, what I've had to go and do is connect with other groups and other like affinity groups, like the litany of ones for Black women with ADHD, some of these other groups, and some of the other things that reputable psychologists that have observed children into adulthood to say work. Otherwise, I wouldn't. That's the thing, like, because I do get benefit from sitting in dark rooms sometimes. I do get benefit from making sure I sleep like at least 7 to 9 hours a night, that I hydrate myself. Other things like the way that I stim is different. It's there, but it's different. And I know we'll get later into that. But yeah, my journey it's been medically, it's not been as clear, but that's that insurer. But I have an opportunity if I want to leave my wraparound care that I love because of my executive function. I love having all my doctors in one building. I love that they can talk to doctors in another building, and there's this whole ecosystem of doctors and all my charts, like all of my scans, all of that is in the same app. But I'm going to need some more specialized care potentially if I try to go back into a traditional office environment. I'm going to need medication. I'm going to need those things if I want to get benefits. Like there are still disability benefits in the United States. Once again, just like the healthcare benefits, what you can access if you need to go to the doctor, that what you can access as far as like payments, transportation, housing, food access, accommodations at your job vary widely. They're not consistent. And that's why I know for me, I figured out ways to mask, not realizing that's what that was. And especially as a Black person, there's a lot of masking that just goes on as a Black American. As a Black American in general, because there's certain behavior not deemed acceptable or will get you fired or worse. So that's where I am with the diagnosis. I wish I had more of an official one, but there are other things I want to dig and delve into to get a little bit more support. And I may just have to pay out of pocket or get another insurance plan.
It's a good reminder. I mean, an upsetting reminder that, not everywhere recognizes ADHD and autism in adults.
Or wants to
Mm.
pay for it or wants to do the full workup for it.
You were saying like in childhood, like how you needed the accommodations you gave yourself to be ready for school. Do you want to talk about what it's like to be both ADHD and autistic and they have their contradictions, especially in one person? What's your experience of that?
So yeah, it's like I very much love going to school. I feel like I've been better at school than being in the workforce as an adult. But I'm realizing one of the ways we had managed to hack school was one, starting in kindergarten, once they realized that I was having a few attention issues. Now, of course, because my mom was in this religious setting where she didn't want me tested, as also being a classroom teacher, she didn't want me as a Black child labeled. You'll hear this out of a lot of Black American parents that they don't want the label because unfortunately it becomes yet another way of discrimination. You're less likely to get any accommodations. If anything, you may not even get proper treatment. You may not even get the opportunity to learn things. You may not get the opportunity to be pushed gently, like nudged, introduced to other concepts, introduced to the full spectrum of learning and the joy of learning. So I would say though, as an adult, I managed to mask, like, now I was never that person that could stay up all night and do a test. I even as a young person, I had to start things early. Now, when I was in high school, when I had homework due the next night, it would be difficult. And I know that my grades probably could have been better had I had more time to work on certain assignments. Yeah. Once I got to undergrad and I could set my schedule, and I was able to kind of hyper study how to be a better communicator. I was able to hyper study how to be a better student. And of course, I had this backbone of having these Black students that looked and sounded like me, and I didn't feel alone. And was no more of being, oh, well, you're so smart and you're so weird and you're so intelligent and you're so nerdy. Our school was full of engineers and other kind of technology oriented people in the mid 2000s. That was kind of what we did. And so it helped that. And to be honest, like, I look back and with this open door of my diagnoses, I'm like, most of us probably were, if we take away autism and ADHD being like, they're still disabilities because they do keep you from doing certain things. But if the things that we can do, the fact that there's so many inventors and technologists and people doing all this pattern recognition, like, we have that support. And so when I was in undergrad, I went to the writing center. I had the mentors and the professors that really wanted us to do well. They wanted us, since there had been some racial issues in a previous iteration of the university where there were lawsuits and protests and everything. At that point in time in the mid-aughts, before this push against DE&I that we're seeing again now, there was effort to make sure that students of color at that school had everything they needed. Now, we didn't have like LGBTQ support when I was there, but they have it now. There's a lot of sort of rigidity and practicalness and technology, but then for some autistics and ADHD folks, that's the environment they thrive in. And having some structure, having people teaching me how to do structure, having people support that I have an Outlook calendar full of my day. Now, some of my classmates tried to get a little weird with me, but I'm like, hey, this Outlook calendar lets me do 10 activities at once. All of my interests get on this calendar, and then I can do a little bit of each of them. But I would notice, I would have weeks out of the month, sometimes semester, when I would just kind of lose focus. I think that was like an early spout of autistic burnout. I would have these weird stomach spasms sometimes. And as we're learning, there's a lot of comorbidity with like muscle tensions and things of that nature that you can't really explain. You're like, well, why are my muscles tensing? I'm moving, I'm exercising. I didn't have a car on campus and I'm walking around, and this campus is huge. It's gotten even bigger in the last 20 years, but it was big then too. And everything worked out. And then I graduated in a semester early because I started to have what I thought were bipolar meltdowns, because my dad was diagnosed with bipolar, and I'm seeming to think that he might have also been autistic as well. But once again, we're not dealing with the correct symptom profiles. So and one of the things.
So by dealing correct symptom profiles, you're saying like he might have been misdiagnosed, or because the criteria doesn't cover the Black experience.
I think he might have been misdiagnosed. They would see my dad have these meltdowns and these outbursts, and I was having, towards the end of my time at NC State, I was having public meltdowns. I had them in very kind of embarrassing places, mainly because I felt, even though there was all the support when I started as a freshman, by the time I was a junior, I felt like obviously popularity contests had started. I was missing social cues. I was missing out on things. At first, I thought it was because I was dealing in conservative religious environments that also masked a lot of that conservative behavior. I could just say, hey, well, I don't want to have sex because I'm trying to save myself for marriage, or hey, I don't want to go out and drink because that's a sin. Like, some of the socialization things that tend to be associated associated with college I wasn't doing. And then, of course, there were a lot of people on campus that were obsessed with having high grades. And it wasn't like we had parental supervision, and we had professors that would push us to whatever we wanted to do. So, me taking 17 to 20 hours a semester trying to do all these classes and everything, but it was burning me out. Like, I spent the majority of my last calendar year in college. One, I had rushed myself through college that last year because I thought that was helping me. And I was burnt out and I was tired of being there. And of course, at the time, I didn't believe in therapy because, once again, therapy's a sin. So we had a very robust student health center. We actually had culturally responsive therapy. We had a Black psychologist and psychiatrist on staff. An ex-boyfriend of mine was speaking with him and getting help from him, but I was freaked out because this man was really rooted in African traditions. Like, we would have a Kwanzaa celebration and he would come and he would pour libations on the stage. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're doing all of that. And of course, I'm in a Black community that's like, oh, well, some of our traditions are demonic and mental health conditions are a little demonic, and your dad's acting demonic. He just he's just yielded to the demon. And of course, it's not helpful to figure out what's really going on.
My grandfather had the same thing. Like, he was,
oh my gosh.
I grew up thinking he was possessed. Like, that was the story that was told. There was a whole, like, someone cursed his food, but it was schizophrenia. So
yeah, it's that, just getting the things that we need as folks of color, because we're not supposed to be full humans. We're just supposed to be there to work. And that's what happened. I graduated and I went to work. And here I come into an office in my full expressive hyperverbal self. I'm apparently not using, at the time we were still using Microsoft Communicator. I was using that too much with an older colleague who just wanted me to call them or go to their desk. Now, they cleared that up with me, but that was like a strike against me. And I realized, like, unlike with grades where, I have a bad grade, I can fix it. I noticed, like, mistakes in the workplace, it's harder to fix mistakes in the workplace. And there's more mistakes in the workplace. And there's things like performance reviews. And if you get a bad performance review, you lose your job. And even though my first job out of college, I was a program coordinator and I was a program manager and I was managing events and I was doing all right with them, but still, like, if you're not liked in certain offices, that can, like, ruin your life. And then that's kind of been the story. I've been in and out of offices, mostly in nonprofit settings. One office was the one I discovered I was having migraines and I was blacking out because of the stress. That's also the other office I realized, even though I'm very interested in writing and communication, grammar is not my favorite thing in either of the languages I speak. I feel like I do better in Spanish grammar than I do in English grammar, because in Spanish grammar, you have to change literally the word endings. But in English grammar, it's, oh, do we really need a common name? And there's so many style books. And I'm like, so why do we have a style book? Why are we using this style book? Isn't it enough to just use one style book just to be standard? Why do we have to use one of the other 10?
The colonizer likes to move the goalpost.
There you go. It right there. And so being in these environments and the goalposts moving, and I'm having these sensitivities, I'm missing I thought I was good at social cues, but once I got out of my home region, I'm missing that people are seeing my expressiveness as this alarm bell. I'm missing that nobody else is, like, going on, like, vocal tangents, and nobody else is as expressive. If anything, I'm thinking everybody's mean because they're so reserved and they're kept to themselves. I'm seeing that, like, in a lot of social situations, it can be relative. And so one key places I do feel my bothness of it all is when I go to work. And in the last few years, as I've wanted to try to run my own business so that I can have more control over how I'm perceived, there are times when I burn out first thing in the morning. There are days like today where if I'm just having conversations all day, like if my job could just be talking to people all day, and then they take whatever I record in Zoom and they transcribe it for me and then they write it out for me, or if my job is just like graphic design, because I did pivot back into graphic design, even though I didn't go to that school when I was an undergrad. It's sometimes my failures or perceived failures in executive function and my need for taking my time or taking extra time to do things are needing less tasks during a day will be seen as failures for me to show up as what people wanted me to be as a Black Southerner who was just conditioned to work, and me failing at work and me not being able to, like, get my work, like my own independent work together. I owe taxes because I forgot to put the taxes aside, and I was trying to be a contract editor, and once again I ran into the style book problems. And then I thought I was like, oh, I speak out on, like, things all the time. Is it because I speak out? Do they not want to protect me, or do they not want to invest in this? Like, what's going on with me that's different? And then I did start to run into, especially in this pandemic time period, At first it was people not wanting to adhere to like social distancing or understanding that I'm still going to wear a mask in a lot of spaces. I've never had a problem being a lone masker. Thankfully, my wife also masks as well. So we'll usually walk in and we'll be the only two. But then I have hypoglycemia. So sometimes I have to like suck it up and pray, get my little air purifier out, scarf my face down, and then go home, especially if I can't get outdoor seating or any seating in a very air quality place. And so speaking out about that within the urban planning industry, speaking out against racial injustice, especially when George Floyd and all the other folks who were murdered at the hands of the state during this pandemic where we're all supposed to be happy-go-lucky and together. Now, mind you, many of us who are Black knew that it doesn't matter about a pandemic. If anything, they're going to use a pandemic against us. And then when they put out the article saying that mostly Black folks and other people of color get affected by COVID more than white people, it's like, then all of a sudden, you weren't supposed to talk about COVID anymore. All of a sudden, you weren't supposed to talk about race anymore. This is where we are and why we are where we are stateside. And I know, like, it's kind of into the next question you were going to ask me, but for me, those contradictions, there's every bit of that comes from the lived experience of what people expect from a Black person, a queer Sapphic person, because of course there's this reputation that Black Sapphic, especially Master Center and kind of in between ones, we're constantly working, strong Black woman trope, like everything's always together, everything's always organized, we're always perfect workers. But I have a brain that needs more room. I have a brain that needs more space. I have a creative brain. I have a brain that can conceive of all these different crochet projects, that can put patterns together, that can remember, like I can drive in a city and then I can remember where I went years later. I'll give directions by street sign. I'll give directions by landmark. In a lot of ways, it's inexplicable how they overlap, but it's obvious when you interact with me in public. Honestly, I have to depend on people to tell me how they overlap, because some people are just like, oh, well, that's just you, Kristen. Let's just work with your skills. Work with your strengths. My therapist says that. Work with your strengths. But others are like, could you not do that? Could you not be that? I don't understand.
Hi, we're taking a short break here to thank you for listening to Queer AuDHD BIPOC. This project is entirely crowdfunded at the time of this recording. If you've benefited from this work in any way, if you believe in wealth justice, in paying our guests for their time and labor, and in helping to resource multiply marginalized BIPOC folks, please consider contributing to our crowdfunding campaign at a sliding scale. You get lots of behind-the-scenes bonus content, and you even have the option to do a peer support call with me, TQ, on drawing neurodivergent strength from the land, our bodies, and our ancestors. If this interests you, please go to rewilding.cc/book to contribute to our fundraiser now. I was smiling when you're talking about the road stuff because I could not give you verbal directions on how to get somewhere, but I could go there by spatial memory and like, visual memory.
Yes.
So I love our brains. So I know you've already talked a lot about how does race, ethnicity, gender queerness, your chronic illness, how they intersect with your AuDHD experience. Is there anything else that you want to add? And like you're saying, a lot of this was shaped by what's expected of you as a Black person.
Like, I know a lot of folks that are going to be on the show are listening. They're like, but I'm still going through it. Now that I have my autism diagnosis, my ADHD diagnosis, now that I've come out as queer, now that, say if, folks that have MCAS or anything else that's been comorbid and has shown up because of our COVID or any other long illness kind of diagnosis, it's like, yeah, but often you're saying these things to your doctor, and yes, you're struggling with your doctor, but this is kind of new that your doctor's questioning you. Sometimes as Black folks, we don't even get through the door good before they're like, oh, well, are you sure you're exercising enough? Oh, the food that you eat, that's the problem. Or, oh, I don't understand why, you do X, Y, Z. And that's not, and then even still, there's still Black doctors, there's still Black experiences that are positive. There's Black experiences where if a community comes together, whatever is that community, however that community identifies and whatever various things come together, they come together against the colonialism and the white supremacy that is evident in our medical diagnoses, in our provision of housing, in how we see working. What I wish would happen the most is that we would honor that everybody doesn't need to be working as much, that no, AI isn't the solution, but technology has helped us and technology can help us. And we need to be very conscious about bias. We need to check ourselves. We need to also look at ourselves and say, hey, are we putting this on ourselves unnecessarily? Are we expecting ourselves to show up as a certain type of Black person, queer person? Are we not giving ourselves grace? Like, not every butcher stud is going to be strong or they're going to have muscles. Give them that grace. And likewise, just because I might show up high femme, possibly with like a rack of acrylics, don't assume I can't type. Don't assume that I'm not struggling. Like I might look like the biggest baddie in the room, but I might be observing you. I'm like, oh no, am I saying the right thing? And as I'm, as I'm stimming, and on the video here, I'm stimming by just kind of moving my body. Yes, I may stim, I may fidget. I might be my favorite thing right now is I have the little gumdrop. Yes, I might be doing this, and yes, I might poke it. But yes, just honor yourself. Really be in touch with your history, with your ancestry, the good and the bad, and also come into the room with empathy for yourself and your limitations, as well as other people's limitations, and just set the tone in kindness and empathy. Set your boundaries. Be clear about, these are my special interests. These are the things that I do well. And I just want to be here to help you. And I want you to exist. I want you to grow. I want you to be who you're meant to be. And that's one of the things I really just want folks to understand about these experiences. We don't need to stop the conversation. The conversation can get weird. It can feel weird, especially, but we won't have an earth if we continue in this direction of not decolonizing and learning how to be stewards of the earth instead of destructors of the earth. If we're sitting out here making everybody work themselves to their exhaustion and burnout point, and we're out here like beating children and sometimes even beating ourselves up physically as well as mentally for what we can and can't do, that's not going to grow the earth. And so yes, some of these oligarchs might make it for a little while, but eventually that's going to shut down, because there's not going to be anything that they can do. There's not going to be any merit. There's not going to be any earth. And as much as they want to go to Mars or whatever planet, some of these planets' atmospheres ain't ready for us either. And some people might find out that they're disabled, like the studies of astronauts where they've gone into space and their bones have moved apart, their muscles have atrophied. Like, maybe accept your disabilities and accept our differences and not try to be so controlling. But I feel like that's like a message for anybody that just seeks to marginalize and seeks to colonize and seeks to like degrade those deemed to be undesirable in whatever time period. The access needs are going to bump into each other, but going forth with kindness and empathy. And yes, like for me, I always bring in like environmental justice, because oftentimes the reason we have deemed people disabled is because we want people to work at a certain level, and we feel like the earth, like everybody globally should be doing certain things, and we should be extracting certain things from certain parts of the earth. But if we use technology and we stop doing that, some of these things that we've been deeming as disabilities stop being disabilities. They just are just different ways of being. And we work to balance access as much as possible. And everybody has a space. Nobody feels left out, because everybody has a space for them. And if there's a space that they can be into, and this is my urbanist and special interest coming into play, like there's a space that they can get into, and that there's a space that can nurture them. It's okay that I have a stylist that works with like tight curly hair, because of course they have that lived experience, and they're not going to sit there and be like, oh no, I'm scared of it, let me get the clippers. Instead they'll be like, oh, let me figure out what you need so you can have this shape of your head. That's kind of and in all of our different food ways, like that's joyful. The dances, the ways of we wear our clothes, like all those things are special. The buildings where people can roll into them, and the elevator always works, and the air is perfect. Like just that balance, that good sense of balance. And some of the things we do in universal design that really help out with balancing, giving people different spaces, especially if we're talking about like sensory needs and how different people have different sensory needs. Just that kindness and empathy to meet people where they are, to get what they need. Like that's what I would love for people to do.
I think you actually, you've kind of answered what's the biggest thing you want the world to know. Are there any questions before that question that you want to also like tap on? And we've talked a bit about your special interests. You've talked about navigating AuDHD in career and relationships. What is the biggest thing you want other newly diagnosed or questioning queer AuDHD BIPOC folks to know to help them feel less alone? Or what would you say to your younger self?
I would say that if you get joy in calling yourself weird, that's one thing, but you're not weird to the greater world. Animals and plants have diversity, and so do human beings. So you are a unique and very special and very awesome human being. And everything that's come before you in your life, like it's the system's doing it to you. Yes, there are times when, we make errors, we make mistakes, but everybody does. Those mistakes and errors shouldn't be the end of the world, as it were. And the person that can't meet you at your verbal preference, the person that can't meet you at your sensory preference, maybe they're not your person. Or maybe, if you have a community where, hey, I want to be in community, but I have quiet hours. I have dark hours. I know I live in a loud place, but hey, let me figure out a way to like dampen the sound, and people are there for you. They don't make you feel like you're not part of your culture. The one thing that I'm glad about is that we're having these conversations across cultures around how ability shows up and expectation of ability shows up. And I do worry sometimes in cultures that aren't hyperverbal and you're not the hyperverbal person, that you feel like you're inadequate, but that's not the case. So there's nothing wrong with being a good listener. There's nothing wrong with being a deep listener. There's nothing wrong with not having speech. Technology is meeting us where we are, and the technology is bridging those gaps. Also, we can come up with new cultural food ways. I think the reason we protect a lot of our culture is because so much of it has been snatched, but I want to challenge us as we move forward to be more inclusive of how our ability challenges can create new traditions. One of the things that I think about in my culture, specifically as a Black Southerner, is like when it comes time for like holidays and the expectation that a lot is cooked a certain way, a lot should be eaten a certain way. Honestly, like I credit my boomer elders for saying, hey, I don't necessarily want to fry all this stuff and we don't eat it. Hey, I don't necessarily want to have us all at the house. Maybe we all go on a family vacation together. Maybe we all go to the beach for Christmas instead of being in the house together. Maybe and of course, for a lot of Black Americans, we're figuring out our ways around the traditional Thanksgiving holiday. Like for so many Black Americans, it's like, yeah, we're grateful for each other. We're not grateful for how we got to America. We're not grateful that anybody is being discriminated against. We just take that moment as a pause. And a lot of even these problematic holidays are the only times we don't have to labor. And so we are trying to create new traditions. Like as we uplift Juneteenth, as we uplift Kwanzaa, and even kind of examines ways those holidays could be strengthened. We celebrate our birthdays for a month. We celebrate anniversaries. My wife and I have multiple wedding anniversaries because of the nature of how we've gotten married and how I want to celebrate. Like my true anniversary is in this month, even though our legal anniversary is in another month. So I want to say, like, to the younger people, you have more resources now. I know that big adults in your life are trying to tell you that you're weird again, that you were doing the wrong thing, but don't listen to them. Don't let them take us back. Keep records, hold on to who you are. Maybe get into like letter writing, journaling, mixtapes, like tactile things that bring you joy and remind you of who you are and pinpoint your point in history. And really finding big adults that will nurture you in any direction. Because, when I came up, the big adults thought that there was guaranteed job places and guaranteed incomes, but economies can change at any moment. Natural disaster can strike at any moment. You can lose access to the things that make you labor force friendly, but it doesn't make you stop being a person. So really emphasize and really gather and really find the people and know that there are other, even if the big adults in your life don't see you, there are others like myself and others that do. And we want to get to you. We want to help you. And we're glad that technology is here so that you can at least hear our voices, see us on the screen. In my case, I do my best to show up 100% the same in all situations. That's another thing. Just if you've had that propensity to be a people pleaser because of how your brain's wired, definitely work on that. Definitely find refuge. Definitely ground yourself. If anything, I'll admit when I woke up this morning, I felt a lot of despair. We're dealing with a lot here stateside. We're dealing with a lot of repression and depression and all the things. And I speak to my own inner child. There's a picture of me at the age of 3 in the book that I'm putting out. And it's in the section where I talk about how I got to the point where I got interested in what I call defying gentrification, which is basically making sense of what the world looks like against the colonial system, specifically as how it deals with land use. So I'm telling myself, hey, okay, for years some years I've had a nice apartment, other years I've had to live with friends, other years, I don't have a job, other years I'm creative on my own. All of that is valid. All of that's part of the human experience. And if I had it my way, especially looking down and being an adult mentor to many, you folks coming after me would have it differently. But some of my peers and some of my elders are under delusion, and I hope that delusion washes away and it changes, but it doesn't mean you have to be under delusion.
What do you mean by, like, what are they deluded about?
That people need to be under certain control, that you can't have the way our brains are wired are wrong, that certain cultures aren't right, that just the levels of control and fascism that we're seeing. And honestly, we got to be honest, it's a global movement. There's fascist movements in every single nation on the earth, but the percentage of who's in control is different in each nation. The folks that are fighting back have different means of control, different comfort levels. And one thing I will say is, like, stateside, each state does in many ways operate like an individual country, as well as it has like the pot of things that we all pull from. And then having all that pot of things that we pull from, and there's a lot of folks that live in a lot of fear. There are a lot of leaders, elected and appointed leaders, that are scared. Like they've gotten comfortable being leaders and they don't know what else their life would look like. But I think if we had a more neurodivergent-friendly world where you can have a brain full of ideas, you don't necessarily have to like be in an official position to do them. I think if we made a world that was more neurodivergent-friendly, people wouldn't have to feel like they needed to be that version where you have to hate somebody in order to get what you need. That to me is a delusion, that you have to hate certain behaviors and hate certain things to get what you need as an individual.
I see. And oh, the stretcher.
As you see, if anything, this podcast is giving me freedom to twist and turn and step in all directions.
I'm trying to remember the original question. You're talking to like your younger self.
What I wanted society to know. Honestly, well, I could share my support needs. I would love for more people to work with me. I'm really good at creating, but I do need people to transcribe notes for me. I do need a lot of sleep. I need to make sure I eat regularly. I need to make sure I drink water. I need to be moving more so that my body doesn't get stiff, but I don't always feel safe in public. Like I have that measure of social anxiety. And it's been amplified by the fact that we have active patrols and there's like people in the states deeming who gets to belong, who doesn't get to belong. Yeah. I would love for my career. I really need an assistant, and I want to find a way to have an assistant in a way that's not degrading. The way I've started to try to do that is I'll hire out for things like cleaning my house, and I'll find a company of people because there's people that love to clean. I don't love to clean, but there are people that's their special interest. Cleaning is special. Their special interest. Cooking is their special interest. Hair is their special interest. And thinking of it in that realm, like keeping detailed notes is a special interest. Like making sure that people's like my emails are answered. I would like more space. We live in a 1-bedroom right now, and that's part of the reason we're pivoting our living situation so that we can grow. Not that I need a mansion, but it would be nice to have a separate studio. But definitely assistance, and me feeling less ashamed to ask for assistance, and me figuring out how to be someone who works with other people in an affirming way, and we work to our strengths. But there's so much of a hierarchy. And of course, we give ourselves ample time to do projects so that we're not screaming at each other and freaking out over how much or how little time we have left to do a project. So yeah, that's my wish list. That's my wishes. That's my support need, just assistance in keeping my ideas going. I have no trouble speaking to things and creating things and coming up with ideas. And that's how I know that there's a comorbidity, because executive function tends to be primarily the attention. And oftentimes I can't pay attention to one thing because I have so many things coming. And then I do have a lot of interest, and there's a graveyard of interest, but I know that graveyard of interest would have less dead items if I could stay focused on more than one item.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We could share a graveyard sometime.
Yes.
So, you run a creative business. How can the audience support that creative business, pay you, compensate you for your creative labor to help you thrive?
Oh, I do have a Patreon for now, patreon.com/Kristen Jeffers. That's where I get a great deal of monthly support. You can go to KristenEJeffers.com, which has a listing of all of the things that I do. I'm on all of those major payment apps. I have a stand store that's directly just for all the art materials. I have a YouTube channel that I'm working on monetizing. You can go to the Chris Pattern YouTube channel, and that's KRIST Pattern. And then Defying Gentrification with Kristen Jeffers is also a YouTube channel, and the Defying Gentrification Playbook is going to be wherever you get books. It has an ISBN, so you'll be able to request it on back order from your favorite bookshops, depending on where you are. May have it on the shelves when it comes out on December 16th, but otherwise, I'll always have the files, and I can always print you one, and I'll always have like a means of getting you one, especially if you want the spiral bound version. I'll also be trying to do some virtual workshops, and there may be some fundraising calls. As of right now, I don't have any active, but definitely if you come on my social medias, either at Black Urbanist or at Chris Pattern, and you see me doing like a major fundraising round, it's for me to have enough money in my bank accounts to meet the thresholds for countries that I may have to flee to, depending on how the situation in the US continues to deteriorate, or just to be able to do this work and be able to support others, to be able to pay back bills and such. So keep a lookout for bigger fundraisers, but day-to-day, chrispattern.com or defyinggentrification.com. There's opportunities there to purchase crochet patterns, my urban design workbook, book me for speaking, have me on other podcasts like this, have me come and do workshops virtual or in person. We can always work out what it needs to happen for my COVID as safety, as well as like my needs around just having enough time and space to process what's happening. So I'm not leaving your venue with a headache, and I'm not leaving your venue feeling like burnt out.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Lots of opportunities to support Kristen, everyone. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything that you wish I'd asked?
I hope that for somebody, especially if you're in the millennial group, like definitely this is not new. We now have tools. I think there's a lot of people in the world that are upset that we are asserting who we are, but we're going to continue to do that. For some of us, our biggest protest is just living in our bodies. Now, of course, for some others of you, there's a little bit more that you can do. And of course, if you do buy the workbook, we do talk through that. We do go through that. And I like to think we do it in a very gentle and fun way. If you enjoyed the stories that I've told and the way that I tell stories, there's a lot of storytelling in that book. And of course, if you get the audiobook version of the book, you'll get to hear me tell these stories in my voice, and you get more of this kind of nurturing creativity, as well as like kind of modeling and nurturing when it comes to like me as a person and me just showing up in the world.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It's always so nice to see you on Zoom and to talk to you. And for everyone who's listening, this has been another episode of Queer AuDHD BIPOC. Please go and support Kristen at all of the links that I'll be sharing in the show notes. And until then, see you in the next episode.